Are you sick and tired of not knowing? Because I've had enough. So I'm going to answer once and for all, do aliens exist? So don't click away. I'll be sifting through the endless sea of crooks, phonies, fakes, riding upon the rippling waves of hoaxes and debunked evidences in hopes of arriving at something credible. So join me for another episode of The Untold Truths. Let's begin. My pseudo-journalistic research led me to this man. He's the infamous Stephen Greer, a medical doctor turned ufologist with access to some of the highest echelons of top-secret classified documents. He's on a relentless mission to bring the truth to you. He does so by writing books, appearing in movies, speaking of the dozens of alien species visiting Earth in spacecrafts. But not only that, he's the man behind two very important organizations. The first was CSETI, which specialized in alien communication. The second, the Disclosure Project, exposes government secrets. But not only that, if you're lucky, you can pay Dr. Greer a small, one-time fee of $5,000 to watch UFOs with him and fellow enthusiasts. Who knows? Maybe you'll walk away with life-altering experiences over the 2-week-long excursion, and he'll walk away with at least $100,000 an event, probably to chill with his friend David Wilcock, whom believes he's the reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, a clairvoyant. It's a fair trade. But first, you'll have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which isn't ironic at all for a man dedicated to getting the truth out there. You see, sometimes it takes covering your own tracks for the tracks to uncover themselves. Just ask the government. They know. But maybe Dr. Greer is right. Maybe we're being quarantined on this little blue planet by ETs afraid of us barbaric apes brandishing nuclear weapons. But I'll need to hear it from someone who isn't sitting on a pile of self-imposed non-disclosure agreements. Maybe I needed to dig deeper, so I dug as deep as I could go. I unearthed the great David Icke, a BBC sports broadcaster turned truth seeker. But there's a problem. You see, Dr. Greer claims aliens are peace-loving philanthropists, but David Icke knows them to be deadlier than a black mamba. They're really synthetic entities forged by the claws of space reptilians. As for us, we're nothing more than cattle on a ranch, held hostage by reptilians that feed off of our negative energy in some kind of cosmic soup. But who am I kidding? This guy is off the rails like Norfolk Southern. I know. I'm looking in the wrong places. Maybe we need to borrow a page from Joe Rogan. Hey Jamie, pull up Bob Lazar. Bob was born in 1959 in Coral Gable, Florida. He was an MIT graduate, physicist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, and borderline genius. You see, he installed a jet engine inside of a car. But if that's not impressive enough, get this. He worked at the top-secret facility S4 near Area 51. There, he reverse-engineered UFOs he was told were from the Zeta Reticuli star system, driven by aliens that staff called the Kids. These bold claims, among many more, garnered him an interview with Joe Rogan, an autobiography, a movie, and sales for merchandise on his company website, including autographed schematic prints of the UFOs he partially dismantled. Clearly, his claims have profited him well, but how well do they profit our pursuit of truth? Great question. Let's jump into it. In 1988, before his employment at S4, Bob was a UFO nut. Some think he wasn't, but check this out. He met up with prominent members of the UFO community, such as John Lear and Linda Howe, a countless number of times before his secretive work. He even took a trip to Area 51 with a friend and had a get-together watching the UFO documentary UFO Cover-Up Live. This is all according to calendar entries he shared during an old interview. It was a busy time because by year's end, Bob was hired to work for the top-secret American facility S4. And just months later, he was sitting in front of screenwriters, spilling the beans on everything in August of 1989. He was going to make a movie for New Line Cinema. And by the way, remember that UFO documentary he watched? It talked about Zeta Reticuli, the same star system that Bob claimed the UFOs he worked on were from. Miraculous. But here's the big problem. MIT says he was never a student, and Los Alamos National Laboratory said he was never an employee. Ouch. You're done, Bob. Game over. Or game on. The company's phone book listed him as an employee, and a 1980s article identified him as a physicist. The plot thickened. Bob said it was all a government cover-up to discredit him. Maybe true. But how is it you go from being a UFO nut to working in a top-secret government facility reverse engineering UFOs to giving interviews and meeting with screenwriters for a movie, all in less than a year's time? Perhaps Bob Lazar was listed in the phone book not because he was a physicist, but because he was a subcontracted technician for Kurt Meyer, hence the KM initials in the phone book. And maybe Bob's physicist title in the newspaper was because the author later admitted he never verified Bob's made-up story. These are insights I learned from Signals Intelligence, who did an amazing job breaking down Bob Lazar's life, including interviews with his acquaintances. However, his interviews are text-only. They contradict interviews ufologist and right-hand man to Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, had with some of the same people. One of them is lying. But who? Well, only one of the two proved that Bob actually worked for Kurt Meyer, and it wasn't Jeremy. Usually I'd move on by now, but I think you need to hear this. They say you're judged by the company you keep, so tell me what you think. Bob's first wife, Carol, held a man hostage at gunpoint while her associates murdered someone. His second wife, Tracy, was arrested for fraud. Bob was no Jim either, because he was arrested in the 90s for illegally running a brothel, and was raided by the FBI in the 2000s after his company supposedly sold thallium to a Michigan murder suspect. Of course, Bob Lazar claims it was because he was in possession of a top-secret chemical called Element 115. Boy, and here I thought he needed aliens to make his life interesting. But if that's not interesting enough for you, how about this? In 1986, 2 years before Bob supposedly worked at S4, he suddenly fled, closing his photo printing business, skipping out on all of his debts. He then married his second wife, Tracy. Plot twist. He was still married to his wife, Carol, who died 2 days later. Say what? I know. And get this. Both his wives used fake names on their marriage certificates. At this point, it's almost more believable he really did work at S4. Here's the bottom line. The Greers, Ickes, and Lazars just aren't gonna cut it. If we want answers, we need credibility. But from who? How about David Grutz, an Afghanistan combat veteran turned intelligence officer with a big dick 14-year-long military career? He was officially tasked with analyzing UFOs for the military, tested in front of the United States Congress, and gave numerous public interviews. He sounds legit, so what's he saying? In a nutshell, UFOs are real, aliens are real. Case closed. End of discussion. Well, not really. He's clever with his wording, using sophisticated terminology like non-human biological matter instead of alien. In addition, David's beliefs come from second-hand knowledge, based on interviews he conducted with unknown people. We were so close, yet so far away. We've run into the dreadful he said, she said problem. This wasn't the nail in the coffin I was hoping for, but at least he's credible, so he's worth remembering. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. There were more things to explore, and explore it I did. I looked into the cases that stood the test of time, like the abductions of Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton, and Antonio Villas-Boas. I sifted through the UFO claims of astronauts like Edgar Mitchell. I even explored the claims of former Canadian Defense Minister and former Russian President. But alas, it was all nothing burgers, and here's why. We need blind faith to believe in the abduction cases. No astronaut seen any alien, but speak of seeing UFOs instead. At best, they know of someone who did. The same goes for Paul Hellyer, former Canadian Defense Minister who picked up a lot of his knowledge by reading UFO books. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said aliens walk among us, but this was said in jest. He told us we'd learn more by watching Men in Black, starring Will Smith. There's a saying in psychology that the whole is different than the sum of its parts. Was I missing the bigger picture by focusing too much on the strokes? Maybe I should have just read between the lines, but how could I when the lines were so blurred? Some of you might have told me to take a hint, but a hint is like a nudge, and nudging me in the right direction doesn't mean I'll end up where I need to go. So one thing became blatantly clear. Forget the people. If I wanted evidence, then I'd need to look at the evidence itself. I discovered many interesting things. I found ancient paintings showing UFOs in the skies. I came across archaeological discoveries like the Atacama skeleton and the 2 alien corpses presented to the Mexican Congress. Heck, I even watched alien autopsy footage and viewed videos of living, breathing aliens uploaded by a mysterious YouTuber. That's not to mention the Roswell event or the Dyatlov Pass incident, nor the mysterious objects in space, and more. If you're interested in a part 2, where I cover the rest of my findings, be sure to let me know. Until then, thank you for joining me on yet another episode of The Untold Truths. Sincerely, the Tea Barista.